Nobody warns you that the world before the flood would feel less like a majestic beginning and more like a market at noon with no plumbing. There are too many people, too many animals, too many elbows, and absolutely nowhere for the smell to go. And right in the middle of all that heat and noise, a tiny rumor starts crawling through the dust about the sons of God, the daughters of men, and children so alarming nobody can mention them without somebody else launching into a full family-sized argument. Hey guys, tonight we begin with the strangest little panic tucked into early Genesis. The sons of God, the daughters of men, and the translation war that changes the whole mood of the room. You're not standing at a safe distance for this one. You're in the crowd, sweating beside strangers, hearing one version from a shepherd, another from somebody's uncle, and a third from the man who swears he saw a very large fellow lift a stone nobody should be lifting. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the sticky world before the flood. The good news, humanity is thriving. The bad news, humanity is thriving. There are people everywhere, actual everywhere. Outside, beside, behind, under whatever patch of shade you thought was yours for 5 precious minutes. You slept on a mat that feels like woven disappointment. Your blanket smells like lanolin, old smoke, and one suspicious damp patch you do not remember creating. Something in the corner has already started chewing, and because this is your life now, it might be a goat, it might be a rat, and it might be both taking shifts. Morning does not arrive peacefully. It crashes in. A baby is crying. A rooster is having what sounds like a personal crisis. Someone nearby is pounding grain with the enthusiasm of a man settling a grudge. You sit up too fast and immediately get a nose full of the room. Warm bodies, stale bread, sheep grease, ash, sweat, sour milk. The lingering spirit of last night's stew, which was mostly onions and hope. Your household is not what a modern real estate listing would call spacious. It's more of an aggressively communal cube. You have family, tools, storage jars, sleeping mats, and at least one animal all sharing an air supply that should have filed a complaint by now. You duck outside, which solves nothing. The lane is already alive. Sandals slap dirt. Donkeys object to existence. Children streak past at knee height like underfed missiles. Somewhere close by, manure is being moved from one place to another, which ancient life has somehow decided counts as progress. And there are people, so many people. Daughters being born, sons being born, cousins, nephews, new wives, old grandmothers, babies tied to backs, toddlers with runny noses, teenagers carrying water and pretending not to stare at each other. The place feels swollen. Not grand, swollen, like a wineskin left too long in the sun. Every conversation overlaps with 3 others. You hear prices, complaints, recipes, gossip, accusations, and somebody insisting his neighbor's goat has once again committed crimes against a garden. A man laughs too loudly. A woman snaps at him to lower his voice. He does not. The air itself seems crowded. You make your way toward the well because of course you do. Everything in this world eventually becomes a trip to the well. The line is already a masterpiece of irritation. Clay jars bump against hips. Flies orbit everybody equally, which is at least democratic. That's where you first hear it. Not announced. Leaked. 2 women are speaking low, then not so low, because scandal has terrible volume control. One says the sons of God saw the daughters of men. Another says they took wives, whichever they chose. A third person leans in with the face of someone absolutely pretending not to eavesdrop while eavesdropping professionally. You stand there with your jar and try to sort out what exactly that means. Sons of God, as in heavenly beings, as in rulers, as in men from a particular line with very confident fathers and even more confident opinions. Terrific. It's breakfast time, and already the conversation has gone feral. Nobody agrees, but everybody has a tone. That's the key. One man says it like he's describing a horror story and keeps glancing upward as though the sky has become untrustworthy. Another rolls his eyes and says it's just powerful men taking what they want, which somehow does not improve the mood at all. Then somebody mentions the children, not ordinary sons, not ordinary warriors, big men, mighty men, men of renown, the sort of phrase people use when they mean, I need you to understand this fellow was a problem from the neck down. Now the whole line at the well is listening. Even the woman who was loudly uninterested is interested at a heroic level. One old man starts describing a fighter from the south who could break a door beam over his thigh. Another says his cousin once saw a fellow so tall he made everyone else look like they'd been assembled from leftover parts. You cannot verify a single detail. That does not matter. Rumor in this world travels on feet, breath, and panic. It arrives dusty and gains height every time somebody retells it. By midday, the story has spread across cooking fires, grazing paths, and work sites. Boys repeat it badly. Men repeat it confidently. Women repeat it with details that make the men sound unreliable, which in fairness often saves time. By evening, half the village is arguing over whether the danger came down from above or strutted in through the front gate wearing a nice belt. And this is all happening in a world already one bad day away from shouting. Everywhere you look, life is multiplying and pressing together. Knees knock beneath low tables. Hands reach for bread before it cools. Animals nose into corners. Infants wail. Dogs snap at scraps. Sweat darkens linen. Dust glues itself to your ankles. The whole earth feels busy in the way a kitchen feels busy right before somebody drops the stew. You start noticing how people look at their daughters, how fathers hover, how mothers pull girls a little closer when certain men pass, how young men straighten when names like mighty men or men of renown come up, trying on admiration the way children try on oversized sandals. It is not a peaceful admiration. It has teeth in it. By late afternoon, the sunlight turns thick and yellow. Heat presses on your shoulders like a tax collector. The smell by now is fully mature. Crushed grass, dung, sweat, standing water, sheep wool, smoke, and human breath baked together into something you do not so much smell as wear. And over all of it hangs this weird, needling question that nobody can leave alone. Who exactly were these sons of God? What kind of men, or not men, see women, take women, and leave behind stories of giant offspring and violent fame? Nobody can settle it. Of course they can't. Give human beings a short, mysterious report, and they will turn it into an intergenerational blood sport before sunset. So you stand there in the dust of the old world, jar against your hip, flies testing your patience, listening to one of Genesis's strangest whispers become everybody's loudest argument. The children run by. The animals shove and snort. The grown men keep talking bigger each time. And somewhere in all that noise, the mood shifts. Because whether the terror came from heaven or from powerful men on earth, the street suddenly feels narrower, and this is only the beginning. The smell changes first. You leave the cool edge of the garden behind, and suddenly the air turns thick with people. Sweat, damp wool, bread smoke, donkey breath, wet clay, and the sour edge of too many bodies sharing too little space. Morning has properly arrived, and humanity is doing what humanity does best in the opening lines of this strange little passage: multiplying, endlessly, aggressively, with no apparent plan for parking. Every path is crowded. Every doorway leaks noise. Children dart between water jars like tiny drunk goats. Women are grinding grain, hauling water, scraping pots, nursing babies, shouting for missing sandals, and stepping around chickens with the hard-eyed focus of people who have no time for foolishness because breakfast still needs making, and nobody in this house intends to starve quietly. You try not to get stepped on. The villages have spread like spilled stew. One cluster of tents became a hamlet. The hamlet became a walled place with a gate and a cistern, and several men who now think they're important because they sit on stones and argue loudly. Fields have become neighborhoods. Neighborhoods have become settlements. Settlements keep coughing out more sons, more daughters, more mouths, more marriages, more everything. Humanity is everywhere. Not in a sleek, impressive empire brochure kind of way. More in a sticky, noisy, deeply inconvenient way. Babies crying, pots cracking, people bickering over goats, mud turning to ruts, ruts turning to sludge. Somebody is always carrying something heavy and resenting everybody around them for not helping. You hear daughters before you really notice them. Girls laughing near the well. Older sisters balancing jars on their heads with the kind of posture that would shame a soldier. Young women weaving, kneading, carrying, combing each other's hair, talking in bursts and whispers. You catch bracelets clinking, ankle dust rising, linen fluttering in the heat, and all the ordinary details of village life that usually mean the world is just being itself. Nothing dramatic yet. That is what makes the shift so unnerving. At first, it feels normal. Crowded, yes. Exhausting, absolutely. But normal in the way ordinary life always is, when too many people live elbow to elbow, and everyone is one broken jar away from having a horrible afternoon. Then the attention changes. You feel it before anyone says it. A strange tilt in the room. The kind of hush that doesn't silence the village, exactly, but slides underneath the noise like dark water under reeds. Women still work. Men still shout. Grain still gets ground into flour with all the glamour of a construction site. But something else has entered the scene. The daughters of men are being seen. Not admired from a respectable distance. Not greeted politely by awkward boys with sweaty palms and no conversational skills. Seen in the way prey feels seen. Seen in the way a person feels when a door closes and the mood in the room changes. Seen by watchers with appetite, and everybody feels it. A father starts walking his daughters home earlier. A mother keeps glancing at the road. Girls who used to laugh openly by the well laugh a little less loudly now. Somebody says a marriage was arranged quickly, too quickly, and nobody likes how the story sounds. Another household keeps its daughters indoors. Another family says they are overreacting. Ancient neighborhoods are exactly like modern neighborhoods in one crucial respect. Give them one alarming rumor, and suddenly everyone becomes an expert. At the well, women lower jars and voices at the same time. One says the young men from the hill country are taking wives from wherever they please. Another says it is not hill country men. Another says she heard of men so splendid and terrible you don't look them in the eye. Another says her cousin's husband's brother swears these are not ordinary men at all, and now everyone is pretending not to listen while listening so hard their ears practically lean forward. The rope creaks. Water slaps stone. Nobody wants to say too much out loud. But the words move anyway, from courtyard to courtyard, from baking fire to threshing floor, from one suspicious aunt to the next. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. Saw. It lands with a thud. Not because beauty is unusual. Beauty has always caused trouble, but because of who is doing the seeing and what comes next. They took wives for themselves, any they chose. Any they chose. That phrase walks into the village like a man with a weapon. You hear it, and immediately your shoulders tighten. Because this is not the language of courtship. This is not a sweet story of exchanged glances by an olive tree while somebody plucks a harp nearby and everyone smells improbably nice. This is selection, taking, choosing from the available human inventory as though daughters are figs in a market basket. That market, by the way, smells terrible. You stand there with flies orbiting a pile of fish that gave up on freshness yesterday. A butcher hacks at meat with blood on his forearms and boredom in his eyes. Dates sweat in the heat. Cheese softens alarmingly. A goat nibbles at a basket rim like it has no respect for private property, because it doesn't. And in the middle of all this ordinary ugliness, people keep murmuring about marriages that don't feel like marriages. A girl disappears from one household into another. A father says it was honorable. His face says something else. A mother says little and works with the tight, jerky movements of someone trying not to smash a pot. Her daughter is gone now, absorbed into some larger household or estate or fortress or whatever these men are building for themselves. Nobody knows whether to call it blessing, ambition, or nightmare. Maybe all three. Ancient life loves a category problem. The men in the gate try to sound calm. They stroke beards. They clear throats. They say words like alliance and strength and future and households joined together. They talk as though larger marriages mean larger stability, which is exactly the sort of thing men say when they don't personally have to be the daughter in question. Meanwhile, the daughters are the ones being counted. You notice the practical details because ancient dread always arrives carrying groceries. A girl's bracelets are removed and replaced by another family's ornaments. Her sleeping mat is rolled up. Her younger siblings watch from the doorway with the wounded confusion of children who know something bad is happening, but haven't yet learned the approved vocabulary for it. The bread still has to be baked that afternoon. The goats still have to be tethered. Life keeps going. Rude, relentless, and entirely unwilling to pause for cosmic unease. And now you reach the part that feels less like a Sunday school mural and more like somebody left a forbidden scroll open in the night. The day grows hotter. Dust sticks to your ankles. Men walk past speaking too softly. A pair of boys are wrestling in the lane until an older woman snaps at them to stop before they break their necks. Smoke from cook fires drifts low, mixing with dung and trampled herbs and that permanent village odor of damp stone and old wool. Then someone mentions the name whispered with a half-swallowed shiver. Nephilim. The word itself feels like a floorboard creaking where nobody should be walking. Nobody says it cheerfully. Nobody says it with the easy pride reserved for sons, born healthy or fields harvested well. It comes out like a thing remembered from the edge of a fire, a thing taller than it should be, heavier than it should be, a word with too much shoulder width. You glance toward the road without meaning to, because once a village starts talking this way, every large man becomes suspicious. Every warrior with unusually broad hands draws a second look. Every local champion starts to feel less entertaining and more like a warning label. The old stories surface. Men of great strength. Men with names people remember because they smashed enough skulls and won enough battles to become songs before they became graves. Heroes, people call them, which in this world often means dangerous men with excellent branding. You know the type immediately, the kind whose reputation arrives before they do, the kind mothers mention with a mix of alarm and admiration they themselves would never admit to, the kind boys imitate with sticks, the kind old men talk about around fires, slapping knees and saying nobody alive now could fight like that, which is a lovely thing to hear in a world already overflowing with violence. These are the mighty men of old, the men of renown. And renown, in a place like this, is rarely earned by kindness. Nobody gets famous because they returned borrowed tools promptly and spoke gently to their livestock. Renown means force. It means victory. It means your enemies left the field flatter than they arrived. It means songs with a body count. You can feel the whole atmosphere swelling around that idea. The daughters are beautiful. The takers are choosing. The children born from all this are not described like ordinary children. Nobody says they grow up quietly, help their mothers, and develop a respectable skill in basket weaving. No. The mood darkens. The scale changes. Human life gets bigger and worse at the same time. It is as if the story itself suddenly has to duck under the doorway. You walk through a settlement at dusk and see how this dread lives in ordinary spaces. A mother pulls her daughter closer when strangers pass. Men sit near the gate pretending to discuss grain while really measuring bodies and reputations. Dogs bark at nothing visible. Torches spit and hiss. Somewhere in the dark, somebody laughs too loudly, and it has that brittle, aggressive edge of men who expect everyone else to be impressed. No one sleeps especially well. Ancient houses are not built for privacy. You lie down on a mat with half the household breathing around you. Someone snores. A baby wakes and objects to existence. Fleas continue their long and distinguished military career in your bedding. Through the wall, neighbors are arguing. Through the roof opening, you see stars bright enough to make you uneasy, because once people start speaking of the sons of God, even the sky begins to feel over-involved. That is the real disturbance here. The boundary between ordinary village misery and something far stranger starts to blur. Until now, the problems were familiar. Too many people, too much desire, men behaving badly in highly predictable ways, families scrambling, bargaining, surviving. But these 4 verses open a side door in the house of Genesis, and when you peek inside, the corridor is wrong. The air is colder there. You can feel it in the phrase itself, sons of God. It does not sound like men from the next village over who happen to own more goats. It sounds elevated, dangerous, too high for comfort, the sort of title that makes you glance upward and immediately regret having a neck. But no one in the village agrees on exactly what that means. One old man snorts and says it just means powerful lords, men swollen with land and ego. Another insists there was something from above in it, and he says, above, while keeping his eyes on the ground, as though heaven might hear him and get ideas. A woman drawing water says she does not care whether they came from the sky or from rich households. Taking is taking, and her voice has the flat edge of someone whose sister did not marry so much as vanish. That shuts people up for a moment, because beneath the strangeness, the lived experience is brutally clear. Daughters are being noticed. Daughters are being taken. Men with too much power are making choices that rearrange households like furniture, and the earth, already crowded and noisy and morally sticky, begins to feel less safe under your sandals. The next line only deepens the unease. My spirit shall not abide with man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. You hear that spoken in the market, and the whole scene changes temperature. Fruit sellers stop haggling for half a breath. A mother bounces a child on her hip and stares past the speaker. Even the donkey tied near the grain sacks looks offended, though, to be fair, that donkey always looks offended. 120 years. It lands like a limit has been posted on the wall of a very unruly tavern. Until this moment, humanity has seemed sprawling, swollen, determined to fill every available patch of earth with houses, babies, arguments, and questionable life choices. Now suddenly there is a line, a countdown, a divine patience meter flickering somewhere above the world. Flesh, the word says. Not noble aspiration, not magnificent civilization. Flesh. Sweaty, hungry, aging, grasping flesh. You feel the insult of it. Also, the accuracy. Because for all the talk of mighty men and glorious names, a village still smells like skin and labor and digestion. Men sweat into their tunics. Women scrub blood from cloth after childbirth. Old people limp. Young men boast and then vomit after too much drink. Children pick scabs and wipe noses on sleeves. Humanity is not a marble statue. It is a crowded family meal where somebody spills lentils, somebody starts crying, and somebody else mutters a curse because the bread has gone hard again. Flesh is not flattering. It is honest. And now that honesty hangs over everything. The grand ambitions of these takers, these choosers, these men swelling into legend, suddenly look temporary. Their names may spread. Their children may grow large. Their stories may frighten whole districts. But over all of it comes this hard sentence like storm pressure gathering over a plain. Not forever. That changes the sound of every boast. You hear warriors bragging by the fire, and now their confidence has a crack in it. You see a new bride carried into a house not her own, and now the torchlight around the doorway feels ominous rather than festive. You watch boys play at combat with sticks, shouting names of famous strong men, and the game starts looking like rehearsal for a catastrophe. The world has become top-heavy. That is the sensation of these verses. Top-heavy. Like a tower built in bad soil. Like a feast table loaded so far on one side, you know the whole thing will tip. Human multiplication should feel like abundance. Instead, it feels congested. Beauty should feel like gift. Instead, it draws predatory attention. Marriage should create households. Instead, it starts to look like acquisition. Great men should protect the weak. Instead, they become legends for all the reasons you would never want your daughter near them. Everything is bending out of shape. And the really unnerving part is how short the passage is. 4 verses. That's it. 4 verses. And suddenly the world of Genesis develops a dark alley that smells like storm wind and bad decisions. You walk in expecting genealogy and household business, and the usual ancient concerns about sons, land, and livestock. Next thing you know, there are strange sons, taken daughters, giant reputations, and a divine time limit hanging over the species. It escalates so fast you barely have time to adjust your sandals. You stand at the edge of a gathering crowd one evening, watching torches move along the wall of a larger settlement. There is music inside, drums and pipes, and the kind of forced celebration that sounds one cup away from a fist fight. A marriage feast, someone says. A good match, someone else says. A powerful house, a beautiful girl, strong sons to come. No one sounds comforted. The roasted meat smells rich and greasy. Wine spills. Laughter rises and falls. Servants hurry through the courtyard carrying platters, sweating under the weight. Men recline and slap each other on the shoulder. Women move in and out of the light with lowered eyes. The bride is somewhere inside all this noise, wrapped in linen and expectation and the plans of people larger than herself. Above the whole scene, the sky is clear. Too clear. Stars burn over the rooftops with that hard, ancient brightness that makes you feel very small and somehow very visible. The talk of sons of God has not left your head. Every shout from the feast sounds a little sharper. Every broad-shouldered guest looks a little too large in the torchlight. Every compliment about strength and beauty feels half a breath away from menace. This is how cosmic dread actually arrives. Not with background music, not with a thunderclap and a neatly labeled monster stepping over a hill. It arrives while bread is baking, while daughters braid their hair, while fathers negotiate, while neighbors gossip, while some people insist everything is fine because admitting otherwise would ruin supper. It seeps into ordinary life until ordinary life starts to feel haunted from the inside. By morning, the village is up again. Grain gets milled, water gets drawn. People complain about prices and weather and lazy nephews. Somebody chases a chicken. Somebody buries a child. Somebody gives birth. Somebody tells a story about a mighty man from years ago who killed 3 enemies with one blow, and half the boys listening stare with open admiration while their mothers look exhausted. Humanity keeps multiplying, but now you know what hangs over it. Not just crowding, not just noise, appetite without limit, power without gentleness. Beauty noticed by the wrong kind of eyes. Men becoming legends in ways that make the earth less safe. And somewhere above or among all of it, a sense that the created order has started wearing its clothes inside out. That is what these 4 verses feel like when you stand in them. Not a neat puzzle on a page, a disturbance, a tightening in the air, a village rumor with cosmic teeth. The kind of passage that makes you glance behind you in broad daylight for no rational reason. The kind that turns the familiar road home into a place where every shadow looks slightly taller than it did yesterday. And the worst part is, the story does not slow down to explain itself nicely. It just leaves you there in the dust. Humanity spreading. Daughters seen. Wives taken. Days numbered. Nephilim on the earth in those days, and also afterward, because apparently the nightmare enjoys a sequel. Mighty men of old, men of renown, the world before the flood growing louder, larger, and less breathable by the hour. You stand with everyone else under that hard, bright sky, listening to the ordinary racket of civilization and the extraordinary rumor moving beneath it. The jars knock together at the well. A baby cries. A dog tears at a bone. Somewhere a singer praises a hero whose hands have done terrible things. Somewhere a mother bars the door a little earlier than usual. Somewhere a girl is being dressed for a marriage she did not choose. Somewhere men look at the daughters of men and decide that desire is permission. And somewhere over all of it, the patience of God is thinning. So you've made it through the strangest 4 verses in Genesis, and the ground already feels less trustworthy than before. Because once you've heard those words in the middle of village life, the world cannot go back to being merely crowded. Now it is crowded and watched. Crowded and taken. Crowded and swelling with the sort of fame that leaves broken bodies behind. The little alleyway has opened, dark and narrow, and you can feel a colder wind moving through it. And it only gets stranger from here. But suppose the whispers are right, someone says beside you, not even bothering to lower his voice properly. Suppose these are not merely powerful men with good cheekbones, but beings who were never supposed to come down at all. That lands in your stomach badly, because powerful men are one thing. Everybody knows what to do with powerful men. You avoid eye contact, keep your daughters close, and hope they get bored elsewhere. But heavenly beings? That is different. That means the problem is not just in the village, it is above it. The sky itself has become intrusive. You glance upward before you mean to. It is just sky. Bright, empty, wide, a few birds, a strip of cloud, the same harmless blue that hangs over laundry lines and goat pens and people arguing over lentils. But now it feels too close, like a ceiling lowering 1 finger width at a time. And once that thought gets in, it does not leave. You walk through the settlement with dust sticking to your damp ankles, and every ordinary thing starts looking wrong. Women are grinding grain. Children are chasing each other with the kind of shriek that suggests someone will cry in 30 seconds. A donkey is producing a smell that could end negotiations between nations. Life goes on. But the rumors have changed the air. Nobody says it clearly at first. Nobody wants to be the first person to announce that heaven has boundary issues. So it comes sideways. A strange husband from the hills. A woman taken into a household no one can quite account for. A child growing too fast. Men waking from dreams with the look of people who would rather not discuss the details. The old men at the gate stop laughing so much. That gets your attention more than the rumors. Old men love laughing at inappropriate times. They will laugh at funerals, taxes, skin rashes, and any injury involving a ladder. But now they sit with their jaws tight, rubbing their beards, staring upward in that deeply unhelpful way men stare when they have no plan and wish to look prophetic about it. A wind moves across the fields. You feel it on your neck and hate it immediately. Nothing in it smells strange exactly. Dust, weeds, distant water, sheep. The usual blend of rural disappointment. But you still get the feeling of being watched, and not in the normal village way where everyone knows your business before you do. This feels vertical. That is the nightmare version of the rumor settling into your bones. Not just that strange beings came down, but that they looked, they noticed, they wanted, and then they took wives for themselves from any they chose. Not courted, not admired from afar, not sent a nice family arrangement with gifts and olive oil and some attempt at manners. Took. That word sits in the room like a man with blood on his hands trying to act casual. You hear it, and the whole thing stops sounding romantic. No moonlit love story here. No celestial violin music. This is not a charming tale about a handsome angel falling for a shepherd girl. This is the ancient version of hearing a deadbolt click from the outside. You pass a house where a wedding happened recently. The garlands are limp now. The jars are empty. A dog is licking grease from a cracked bowl with the devotion of a tiny, hairy priest. There should be leftover joy in the place. Laughter. Guests retelling the embarrassing part where someone tripped over a stool. Instead, there is a hush around the doorway. You know that hush. It is the hush people use when they are pretending not to be afraid of a family situation. Somebody has married badly. Somebody has entered a household that feels wrong. Somebody is not coming back for casual visits and cheerful bread making. The women of the neighborhood avoid looking directly at the threshold. The men suddenly have urgent tasks involving rope. And above all of it is the rumor. Not men. Not ordinary men. Watchers. That is one of the names that begins to gather around these beings in later tellings. Watchers. Which is unpleasant already. Nobody wants to be watched by heaven's weird security department. The word itself has too much eye in it. Too much wakefulness. Too much standing on a roof at night while the world sleeps below. You try to picture one. Bad idea. Your imagination gets over-involved immediately. Too tall, too bright, too human in all the wrong ways. Something that can wear a face but never relax into it. You end up with a figure at the edge of a field at dusk, still as a post, looking down with the patience of stone and the appetite of a man at an all-you-can-eat feast. No, thank you. And yet, that is how the world starts to feel once this rumor gets its hooks into you. As though unseen eyes are on the edges of things. The hills are not just hills. The night is not just night. The stars are doing their normal twinkling routine, but now it seems suspicious, very decorative, almost smug. You sleep badly. Every sound in the dark becomes a message. Roof beams creak, a lamb bleats. Something scrapes the wall outside and turns out to be a branch, which is nice, except your heart has already sprinted halfway to Jericho. The room smells of old straw, lamp smoke, stale sweat, and wool blankets that should have been washed 3 seasons ago. Your cousin snores like a clogged drainage ditch. No rest for the anxious. At dawn, you go to draw water and find the women already talking in low, hard voices. They are not gossiping for fun. This is not the playful kind where someone's mother insulted someone's stew and now the whole village is enjoying itself. This is fear trying to look useful. One woman swears her niece was chosen. Another insists she saw figures on a ridge at night, too still to be shepherds. Another says her brother met a man whose face seemed almost right, but not fully. Beautiful, yes. Also terrible, like someone made a husband out of polished bronze and left out the part where he blinks normally. Nobody laughs at that. You lower your jar into the well and hear the rope rasp against stone. It is a dry, rough sound. Your hands smell like wet clay and old fibre. Water splashes far below, and for a moment even that noise feels ominous, because once fear gets hold of a place, everything joins the choir. The children sense it too. They always do. They stop wandering as far. They play closer to doorways. They ask questions that make adults snap and then feel guilty. Is the sky angry? Are the tall men real? Why can't I go past the fields? Why did Auntie cry after the wedding? A small boy says he saw someone walking on the ridge at sunset, and his mother grips his shoulders so hard he yelps. Nobody sends him back outside. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about pleasantly. If heavenly beings crossed into human life, then the whole creation order has gone slippery. Categories are leaking. The fence is down. The upstairs neighbors have come through the ceiling and are helping themselves to the refrigerator. It is not merely wickedness, it is contamination, wrong things mixing, boundaries treated like suggestions. That makes the body feel unsafe. You feel it in your skin, not just your mind. The normal distance between heaven and earth, between mortal and immortal, between flesh and whatever these beings are, has collapsed into your street. You still need bread. You still patch sandals. You still scrape burned porridge out of the pot because someone got distracted. But under the errands is a constant pulse. This world is no longer staying in its lane. The marriages become the great public sign of it. A wedding in your world is normally loud, crowded, sweaty, and impossible to avoid. There is bread, wine, dust, ululating relatives, and at least one elderly aunt looking unimpressed by the entire institution. It is joyous chaos. It smells like roasted meat, olive oil, trampled herbs, unwashed cousins, and spilled drink souring in the sun. But these unions feel different. Nobody can settle into celebration when the groom is possibly from the wrong side of reality. The songs falter. The musicians look nervous. The bride's mother smiles with the rigid face of a woman whose soul is trying to crawl out through her scalp. Guests eat because refusing food would be rude, but they keep glancing toward the couple like people trapped at dinner with a tiger in sandals. Then come the children. This is where the stories grow teeth. At first, it is talk. A boy bigger than the others. A young man with shoulders like a gate and a temper to match. Someone whose appetite can flatten a household's food stores in 2 days. Someone who can lift things nobody should be lifting. Someone who fights for fun, wins constantly, and already has that dangerous local celebrity glow. The Nephilim. Even the name feels like a rock dropped into water. Heavy, sudden, ripples everywhere. Maybe it means fallen ones. Maybe it points to those who cause others to fall. Either way, nobody hears it and thinks, "Ah, yes, a calm and trustworthy neighbor who will return my shovel." These are giant reputations in giant bodies. You know the type even before the legends fully form. The strong man in the square everyone pretends to admire because nobody wants to be his enemy. The warrior whose fame arrives before he does, followed closely by property damage. The men of renown, which sounds impressive until you remember that being famous in a violent age usually means a lot of other people had a miserable afternoon. Their names travel. They move through the world like walking weather. Villages hear of them and tense. Mothers pull children inside. Men act brave in groups and then separately reconsider. These figures become the ancient equivalent of celebrity warlords, all muscle and story and dreadful PR. Half the region is terrified of them, and the other half is pretending terror counts as admiration. You see one once, or think you do. He's across a field near the threshing floor, surrounded by ordinary men who suddenly look like boys. He laughs at something, and the sound carries too far. His arms are thick as roof beams. His stance has that awful ease some men have when they know they can break whatever they touch. Sunlight hits him, and instead of making him look noble, it just helps you estimate the size of the problem. You decide very quickly that this is enough seeing. Because the horror of this reading is not just strange origins, it is what strange origins produce. A world of oversized appetites, bodies built for domination, households arranged around fear, men who become legends because everyone else bleeds around them. You can almost feel the ground compacting under their steps. And the corruption does not stop with marriages. Later traditions pile on detail, like a man overpacking for a journey and somehow still forgetting socks. The Watchers do not merely come down and take women. They teach things, forbidden things, metalworking for weapons, charms and enchantments, cosmetic arts, secret knowledge, the glamorous and the lethal arriving in one ugly gift basket. It is civilization with a sinister upgrade. You are minding your own business, trying to make a decent knife, and suddenly somebody has learned how to turn bronze into a personal philosophy. Someone else is teaching the young men to love blades too much. Someone is mixing paints and powders, and that sounds harmless until you realize vanity and violence are now holding hands and skipping through town. Wonderful. The world begins to rot from the top down. That is what this atmosphere feels like. Not ordinary sin, grubby and familiar, but elevated corruption. A pollution descending through the ceiling beams. The beings associated with heaven bring not holiness, but distortion. What should have guarded order instead accelerates ruin. That betrayal stings. Because you expect trouble from Earth. Of course you do. Human beings are perfectly capable of making a mess with bread, jealousy, and poor impulse control. No supernatural help required. But when the trouble comes from above, it makes the whole cosmos feel unreliable. Even the bright places seem compromised. You notice people changing. Men become more hungry for fame. Women are praised and evaluated with a coldness that makes your teeth grind. The young start wanting power the way thirsty people want water. Craft becomes weaponry. Beauty becomes bait. Strength becomes a public religion. Every market day feels a little harder around the edges. The noise gets meaner. A village argument used to be about landmarkers, somebody's goat, or whether your cousin diluted the wine again. Now there is bragging, threatening, men performing violence before they even commit it. You hear boasting around the fire and realize nobody is ashamed anymore. They are auditioning for legend. This is what forbidden knowledge often looks like on the ground. Not glowing scrolls in a dramatic cave. Not mysterious background music. It looks like men making sharper things and duller consciences. It looks like skill cut loose from wisdom. It looks like households growing richer in tools and poorer in peace. Very advanced, completely disgusting. The women bear the weight of it first. Of course they do. They are noticed, chosen, taken, folded into arrangements nobody around them can stop. Their bodies become the crossing point of cosmic rebellion and human vulnerability, which is an absolutely vile sentence to have to live inside. You see the strain in their faces, the silence at the well, the way older women start tracking girls with their eyes like anxious shepherds counting lambs near a cliff. No one feels protected. Even the men who swagger do it nervously. They boast because they are frightened. They attach themselves to strong names because ordinary humanity suddenly feels flimsy. When beings from heaven are taking wives and siring monsters, your local tough guy starts looking less like a champion and more like a child waving a stick at thunder. The priests, the elders, the family heads, all the respectable machinery of order starts to look laughably undersized. What are they going to do? Post a boundary marker against the sky? File a complaint? Stand in a field and shout upward that this violates custom? Everyone is outmatched. The authority structures of ordinary life can handle theft, insult, maybe even blood feud. They cannot handle celestial trespassing, so dread settles in. It settles over meals, over fields, over births and betrothals and bedtime. You wake with it. You carry it through the day. The smell of baking bread still drifts from ovens. Sheep still need shearing. Chamber pots still need emptying, which is its own ongoing spiritual trial. But all of it is happening under a shadow. The heavens feel too near, and not in the comforting way poets like. Not stars singing and glory shining and everyone feeling inspired. More like the upper floor of a dangerous house has sprung a leak. More like you hear footsteps overhead at night and know with bone-deep certainty that no one should be up there. One evening, the horizon goes red at sunset. Normally, it would be beautiful if you are the sort of person who enjoys pretending dust and heat are romantic. Tonight, it looks like a warning. The hills darken. Birds cut across the sky in jerking lines. Smoke from cooking fires hangs low over the settlement, catching in your throat. Somewhere, a woman begins singing to a child, and even that sounds tired. You sit outside your house and watch the ridge. Everybody does now. Casual tasks get stretched longer because nobody wants to go indoors too early. Men mend tools they already mended. Women shake rugs with a level of concentration that suggests they would gladly shake the entire age if possible. Children are called in before full dark with none of the usual arguing. Then someone points. A shape on the high ground. One, maybe two. Too far to identify. Too still to like. Human-sized perhaps, or maybe distance is lying to you, which would hardly be a first. The whole village goes quiet in that instant, as if silence might make you invisible. The figures do not move for a long time. That is almost worse. If they walked away, your body could do something with that. Relief, maybe. If they came closer, terror would at least be honest. But they simply remain there, outlined against the last smear of light, watching the dwellings below like landlords inspecting damaged property. You realize your mouth has gone dry. Someone beside you whispers a prayer with the speed and repetition of a man trying to nail his words to heaven before they blow away. A child begins crying and is hushed so quickly it turns into hiccups. A dog barks once, then thinks better of it. The smell of lentil stew drifts from a nearby house, absurdly normal and suddenly nauseating. At last, the figures turn. They disappear over the ridge without hurry. Nobody moves. You all stay where you are, staring at empty ground as if your eyes might drag the shapes back into view and force an explanation. But there is no explanation, only the cold film of fear on your skin and the awareness that darkness has now arrived properly. Lamps are lit, doors are barred, sleep becomes a theory. 3 years pass. The smell hasn't improved. Neither has the world. The strong grow stronger. The famous grow more brutal. Stories spread faster than grain prices and land harder. This giant fought 6 men. That one broke a gate. Another took what he wanted and left a household ruined behind him. Whether every tale is true stops mattering. The effect is true. Fear walks ahead of these men like a herald, and under it all is the older dread. Their fathers were not supposed to be here. That detail keeps the whole age feeling infected. These are not merely bad men in a bad time. They are symptoms of a breach. Their size, their violence, their renown, all of it feels like evidence that some line was crossed and the damage is now breeding. You look at the next generation and wonder what else is coming. People become fascinated despite themselves. That is part of the horror too. Terror and attraction sharing a blanket. Boys imitate the mighty men in play. Young men dream of fame. Storytellers make the giants larger each season. You hate them, but you cannot stop talking about them. Violence has become glamorous in the most ancient, embarrassing way. The Watchers do not merely corrupt bodies, they corrupt imagination. Now the village wants what destroys it. Stronger sons, greater names, secret knowledge, advantages. The forbidden has acquired branding. It is marketed as power, beauty, and victory. And people buy in because ruin rarely introduces itself as ruin. It usually arrives looking expensive. So the earth thickens with the consequences. Blood in the soil, fear in the houses, pride in the streets, skill without mercy, desire without restraint. The ordinary limits that make life bearable get treated like obstacles for lesser beings. Every appetite starts speaking in the voice of entitlement. Why should I not take? Why should I not know? Why should I not become great? That is how a world goes rotten from the top down. Not all at once. Not with a trumpet blast and official announcement. More like oil spreading through flour. More like mold in the walls. More like a smell in a room that starts faint and ends with everyone pretending not to notice, because admitting it would require action. The heavens have trespassed. Humanity has joined in eagerly, and now everything is sticky with the aftermath. By this point, even the weather feels accusatory. Clouds build over the hills, and people squint at them as if expecting a verdict. Thunder rolls, and every conversation pauses. Rain falls too hard, or not at all. The ground alternates between mud that tries to steal your sandals and dust that gets into your teeth, your eyes, your soup, and your private thoughts. Creation itself seems tired of hosting this nonsense. You stand one afternoon at the edge of a field where grain should have brought comfort. Instead, you hear shouting in the distance, then the sound of something breaking, then the ugly cheermen give when they are enjoying another man's humiliation. A hawk circles overhead. Flies settle on the sweat at your neck. Somewhere nearby, a child is practicing with a sling, already wanting to become a name people fear. You look up again. That is what this interpretation does to you. It makes you keep looking up, not in hope, but in wary disgust. The sky has become associated with intrusion, height with menace, glory with trespass. Even beauty feels compromised when it belongs to beings who crossed a line and dragged the world after them. And still the stories spread. About watchers on mountains, about heavenly rebels teaching secrets by night, about women taken, about giant sons, about violence becoming a badge of honor, about a generation so enthralled by power it no longer recognizes corruption even while standing ankle-deep in it. The whole age develops the atmosphere of a house where everyone knows something foul happened upstairs and nobody wants to clean it. But the rot keeps coming down the stairs. You feel that in your bones now. The world before the flood is not merely crowded or noisy or morally shabby. It is warped, bent out of shape, heaven and earth no longer relating properly, human beings no longer wanting proper things, strength admired because it can terrify, fame adored because it can dominate, knowledge pursued because it can control. And the neighborhood, frankly, has become a horror story. Not jump-scare horror, not a quick shriek and then relief. This is the slow horror of realizing the structure itself is wrong. The beams are split. The roof leaks corruption. The The family upstairs is feral. Something large is pacing in the next room. Also, the whole place smells like smoke, blood, wet wool, and the sort of damp rot that means you should have left months ago. But there is nowhere else to go. So you live under the Watcher's shadow. You hear the giants' names. You watch households tighten around fear. You feel the old boundaries fraying under too much appetite. The world keeps moving toward its next terrible thing, with the heavy certainty of a cart rolling downhill, Axel screaming. And the sky remains above you, too high to reach, too close for comfort. The smell changes as you leave the nightmare of wings and watchers behind. Not because the world gets better. Absolutely not. It just gets more familiar, less cosmic dread, more rich men in sandals making everyone miserable before breakfast. Then again, maybe the real horror is more familiar. No glowing beings, no celestial jailbreak. Just men with status deciding every boundary is optional. You step into a settlement where the houses of ordinary people crouch low and hot against the ground. Mud brick, reed roofs, courtyards packed with chickens, jars, grinding stones, and at least one child with a runny nose staring at you like you owe him money. Smoke hangs in the air from cooking fires. So does the smell of dung, sour milk and bread baking, just enough to make you hungry and sad at the same time. Across from these little homes rises a larger house. Of course it does. It has thicker walls, a wider gate, more servants moving in and out, and that particular atmosphere wealthy households always manage to create, where everything looks organized, but everyone inside is tense. Donkeys are tethered in the shade. Guards lean with spears near the entrance, trying to look important. Bronze catches the sun. Somebody important lives here, which means somebody nearby is sleeping badly. You feel the whole reading change right there. No heavens cracking open. No beings descending through cloud and terror. Just a strong house, a bigger granary, more land, more sons, more livestock, more men who have learned that if you have enough power, people stop calling your appetites sins and start calling them arrangements. And now we arrive at the part nobody enjoys admitting. Here, the sons of God are not strange visitors from above. They are rulers, nobles, men from powerful lines, maybe kings with inflated opinions, maybe warrior aristocrats with family trees they recite at supper. Maybe the line of Seth if you prefer your disaster with a more respectable genealogy. However you stack it, the room fills with human breath instead of celestial fog. And somehow, it still feels awful. Because you know this kind of place. You know the look of men who enter a market and never hear the word no. They move like every stall is theirs. Every voice should lower when they pass. Every father should become suddenly interested in cooperation. They smell of oil, leather, horse, old sweat, and expensive confidence. Their tunics are cleaner than yours. Their hands are softer than a labourer's and bloodier than a labourer's, which is a truly irritating combination. A girl draws water at the well. She's doing the 1,000 small balancing acts of ordinary life. Jar on hip, sandal slipping on the dust. Hair tied back badly because she was rushed out of the house at dawn. Her hands smell faintly of grain flour and wet clay. She's thinking about supper, maybe, or whether her youngest brother will break another cup and blame the goat. Then a servant from the big house notices her. Not in a romantic way either. None of this moonlight nonsense. More like a man inspecting livestock with a clipboard in his soul. He squints. He turns. He murmurs to someone older. A glance is traded. Another servant asks a question too casually. Whose daughter? How many brothers? Is her father in debt? Does the family lease land? Are they loyal? By evening, the household knows her name. By next week, her father has been invited to talk. Invited. That lovely, ancient word that means you may technically refuse if you enjoy consequences. So you go with him. You duck through the gate into the larger courtyard where everything smells of baking bread, polished wood, trampled rushes, and ambition. Servants move quickly with lowered eyes. A scribe sits with a tablet, ready to make other people's lives official. Somewhere, a goat complains with the exact tone of a disrespected aunt. You wait while a steward arranges his face into friendliness. He offers watered wine. Your father accepts, because not accepting would be noticed. The cup tastes faintly of clay, sour grape, and the residue of 20 other negotiations that ended badly for someone poorer. The steward smiles and praises your family. He praises your daughter's beauty. He praises the honor being offered. He praises the joining of houses, which sounds grand until you realize one house is swallowing the other whole. Nobody asks what the girl wants. Why would they? This is not that kind of century. Her opinion is somewhere below the goats and slightly above the spoons. Maybe. This is how that line lands in your ears when the men in power are the ones doing the taking. Men seeing women, men taking women, men marrying as many as they choose, not because the women are loved, because they can. And the word taking does a lot of ugly work. You can feel it in the body. The quick tightening in a mother's jaw, the silence at supper when the news is announced, the way sisters stop speaking and start folding cloth harder than necessary. The father nods because land is at stake, debts are real, and powerful households have long memories. The girl sits very still with her hands in her lap, and everyone behaves as though stillness means consent. It does not. It means there are no exits. Morning comes. She leaves her family house. She takes a bundle with extra garments, maybe some oil, maybe a spindle, maybe the blanket her mother used when she was a child. The road to the larger house is not long, which somehow makes it worse. You can still smell her old courtyard from halfway there. Smoke, lentils, damp wool, a baby crying, someone pounding grain. Her old life is right there, close enough to hear, and already gone. At the gate, the women of the larger household receive her. Receive is generous. Assess is closer. They look at her face, her clothes, her dowry, her posture, her usefulness. Another wife is already there, maybe two, maybe more. One has painted eyes and tired shoulders. One has a baby on her hip and the expression of someone who no longer expects fairness from heaven or earth. Welcome to the dynasty. Your new roommates are jealousy, childbirth, and politics. And yes, maybe this is the line of Seth in some tellings. That makes it almost ruder, because then the men are not pagan kings in outrageous hats. They are supposed to be the decent line, the cleaner branch, the family that remembers the name of God while the rest of the neighborhood is busy inventing fresh varieties of violence. But give human beings enough generations, enough pride, enough room to feel superior, and suddenly the good line is doing what powerful men always seem weirdly excited to do. Collecting. Women, land, prestige, sons, alliances, all of it stacked up like jars in a storeroom. A household grows, then it swells, then it sprawls. More wives, more servants, more children, more cousins sleeping on mats in side rooms that smell like lamp smoke, stale air and unwashed feet. A big family sounds wholesome until you actually visit and realize it's 90% tension and one overworked aunt trying to keep stew from burning. Privacy is gone. Personal space has died. A wealthy household in the ancient world is not a calm estate with tasteful landscaping. It is noise, crowding, labor and hierarchy packed behind walls. Infants wail, millstones grind, servants gossip while carrying water. Somebody is always pregnant, angry or bleeding. Usually all three are represented before lunch. You move through the rooms and see how power works without needing any monsters at all. There is the favored wife, or today's version of favored. There are sons being measured for future importance. There are daughters whose value is discussed like trade goods with hair. There are stewards counting grain. There are old mothers guarding influence like dragons with wrinkles. There are men at the center, deciding which branch of the family gets fed first, married first, promoted first, remembered first. And around that center, everyone adjusts. A ruler's son takes another wife because it strengthens an alliance. A nobleman adds a woman to his household because he likes her face. A clan leader decides beauty is a form of tribute. A father with 3 hungry children tells himself this arrangement could be worse, which is the sort of sentence humanity has used to justify nonsense since the beginning. Outside, ordinary people watch and learn the lesson. Not a good one. They see that strength is admired. Seizing is normal. Marriage can be a velvet sack thrown over a person's head. The men in charge are not examples of restraint. They are examples of appetite with a title. Of course, the whole earth starts to feel wrong. Leadership trickles downward like spilled oil. It gets into everything and leaves stains. So you go to the marketplace, because life keeps needing onions. The market is loud enough to blur your thoughts. Donkeys bray, fish stink in baskets, flies gather on dates and figs, sweat runs down backs, sand grits between your teeth. Men shout prices with the confidence of liars. Women bargain like generals. Children dart between legs. Somewhere nearby, something is frying in oil old enough to have opinions. Then a retinue enters. You know before you see them. The crowd does that subtle folding thing where people move aside without admitting they are moving aside. Soldiers first, then servants, then a litter or a mounted man, depending on how dramatically insufferable he feels that day. Jewelry glints. Perfume hits the air like an ambush. Real perfume too, not the usual village blend of smoke, sheep, and regret. A young woman beside you goes still. Her mother notices immediately. The mother adjusts the girl's veil and turns her body away just slightly, which is the ancient version of putting your daughter behind a potted plant and praying for invisibility. Other women do the same. Eyes drop, backs hunch. Nobody wants to be seen too clearly when men like this are selecting from the room, because that is the earthly version of the horror, being seen by power, not known, not cherished, seen, measured in a glance, face, hips, youth, family use, political convenience. A ruler can call it marriage, and everyone has to stand there pretending a decorated cage is somehow a gift. You can almost hear the old machinery whirring. Messengers, contracts, bride price, promises, pressure. A legal transaction wrapped around a human heartbeat, and all of it can hide under respectable language. Wife, union, alliance, blessing, house building, legacy. Words are wonderful that way. They can put oil on a very ugly machine. You sit in the courtyard that evening while the neighbors talk. Not openly. Nobody is eager to be overheard criticizing the local strongman unless they have a secret passion for disappearance. So people speak in side glances, mouth-tight shrugs, and careful phrases. A good match. A fortunate arrangement. Her family will be secure. May it be for peace. Ancient people were excellent at saying, "This is terrible," without using those exact words. The bread passes around. It is coarse, warm, and full of husk fragments trying to assassinate your gums. Lentils steam in the bowl. A child falls asleep against his mother's arm. An old man spits into the dust and mutters that in his father's day, men took one wife and were exhausted enough. Nobody laughs loudly, but several shoulders shake. Then the talk shifts to the mighty men. Of course it does, because where powerful rulers gather wives like trophies, they also produce sons with reputations large enough to enter a room before they do. Big men, violent men, men with names carried from village to village, the way smoke carries from fire to fire. Some are genuinely huge. Some are merely brutal with excellent public relations. In either case, you are expected to be impressed. The stories grow in the telling. This one killed 3 men with a spear. That one broke a gate. Another can bend bronze with his bare hands, which sounds unlikely until you meet the type of person who would happily exaggerate his cousin for 5 straight hours. Renown builds fast in a frightened world. People repeat names because names are easier than justice. So the household system feeds the legend machine. A ruler takes what he wants. He builds a bigger house. He sires sons. Sons grow into fighters. Fighters gain fame. Fame attracts more loyalty, more fear, more women, more land. Soon the village is full of men telling stories about greatness, while women trade recipes for surviving within it. No angels required, just hierarchy and unchecked appetite. You can see why some people prefer this reading. It keeps the whole thing on Earth, where the flood story is already heading anyway. No need to explain heavenly biology, which frankly sounds like the kind of conversation that ruins a perfectly decent meal. Instead, the horror is the old, familiar human one. The strong consume the vulnerable. The powerful call it order. Everybody else learns to live around the bruise. And the bruise spreads. Because once elite men start treating desire like law, nobody lower in the ladder gets safer. A king takes many wives. A noble copies the king. A clan chief copies the noble. A prosperous landowner copies the chief. Soon half the village is acting like self-control is for peasants. You can almost watch the rot move from house to house like mold in damp grain. 3 years pass. Nothing improves. The big household is bigger now. Its walls have been repaired. Another room added. Another wife brought in. More children underfoot. More jars in storage. More servants sleeping in corners that smell of rush mats, old oil, and human exhaustion. The first wife has mastered the art of smiling without warmth. The steward has become fatter. The daughters have become marriageable, which means negotiations are beginning all over again, because apparently one generation of misery was not enough. A feast is held. Music scrapes at the air. Meat roasts over flame, dripping fat into the fire with a hiss that makes every hungry person in the courtyard glance over. Wine flows. Men boast. Old victories are retold with additions that would embarrass anyone with standards. Boys wrestle in the dust while fathers watch and nod like they are evaluating future weapons systems. The women serve, arrange, soothe, calculate, endure. You see one young wife there, maybe the girl from the well years ago. Her wrists are heavier now with bracelets she did not choose. Her face is older than it should be. She carries a child on one hip and gives instructions to a servant with crisp efficiency, because surviving long enough in these houses turns you practical, or it turns you into a ghost, and she has not disappeared yet. She hears the men praising heroes, men of renown, mighty ones, builders of great names. Her mouth tightens for just a second, because she knows what renown smells like up close. It smells like wine on a man's breath when he decides to take another wife. It smells like leather belts, horse sweat, perfumed oil, and the stale heat of crowded rooms. It sounds like negotiations held in the next chamber while a girl waits outside pretending not to understand her own future. It feels like waking at dawn in a household where everybody belongs to the ambitions of one man. That is the earthly reading in your bones. No thunder from heaven, just patriarchy with a security detail. And before you laugh too hard at the ancient world, the whole thing has an unpleasantly modern flavor. Men with status, families making deals, public glory built on private misery, people describing coercion in polished words so dinner can continue. Civilization has changed its wardrobe many times. Its bad habits keep showing up in the same sandals. But the morning isn't over yet. Outside these walls, the rest of the world is taking notes. Children grow up seeing which men are feared and praised. Songs are made about strength, not gentleness. Reputation rises for those who seize, build, conquer, and father impressive sons. Villages learn to admire exactly the sort of man they should lock out with a chair under the door. The culture gets louder, harder, thicker with boasting. You feel the air before the flood turning stale. Not stale like old bread. Worse. Stale like a room where too many people have been lying for too long. A room heavy with smoke, sweat, and the confidence of men who have never been corrected. Creation starts to feel crowded with grasping hands. Every good thing becomes something to capture. Marriage becomes acquisition. Children become legacy projects. Women become territory. Fame becomes holiness with better branding. No wings, still monstrous. And that may be the point of standing in this version for a while. You don't get to comfort yourself by blaming everything on bizarre creatures from another realm. You have to stand in the courtyard and watch plain old human power do what it does when no one stops it. You have to hear the marriage drums and know they are not always celebration. You have to smell the feast and remember whose hunger paid for it. The sun drops lower. Shadows stretch through the settlement. Evening smoke rises from cooking fires. In the smaller houses, suppers are scraped together from grain, lentils, onions, maybe a little oil if the jar has mercy left in it. In the larger house, servants prepare more platters. More guests arrive. More deals are made. Somewhere, a girl is told she has been favored. Somewhere, a father is thanking the very people he fears. And somewhere, boys are listening to men of renown speak and deciding what sort of men they want to become. That is how a world gets ready for judgment without noticing. Not all at once. Not with one dramatic scream from the sky. With households, customs, privileges, the little daily surrender of other people's dignity to your own appetite, 100 arrangements, 1,000 acts of taking, layer after layer until the whole earth smells wrong. The stars come out over the roofs one by one. No watchers descend tonight. No blazing beings cross the dark. Just lamplight behind walls, laughter from the rich courtyard, muffled weeping from a servant's corner, and the slow, heavy breathing of a world that has made power into a god and called the arrangement normal. "You're late," someone mutters, not looking up from the scroll. "Of course you are. Everybody in this room is late, tired, underfed, and one spilled ink pot away from a public spiritual crisis." The chamber is small, hot, and aggressively unimpressive. Lamps smoke in the corners. Reeds scratch. Wax drips. The air smells like oil, dust, old leather, and the sour human determination of people who have been arguing too long while wearing too much wool. And this is where the room fills with translators, rabbis, scribes, priests, and deeply sleep-deprived men arguing over 2 or 3 Hebrew words as if the fate of the cosmos depends on the vowel sounds. Which, to be fair, it sort of does. You step farther in and immediately regret it because there is no graceful way to stand around a low table covered in scrolls. Your robe catches on a stool. Somebody clicks his tongue. Another man has spread out a manuscript with the territorial confidence of a cat occupying the warmest seat. He's guarding it with both elbows, like you might snatch it and run. No one here is relaxed. A younger scribe is grinding ink in a shallow dish, shoulders tight, jaw set, trying not to sneeze into sacred material. The ink itself is thick and glossy, black as wet olives. It smells metallic and bitter. His fingers are already stained. So are his sleeves. So is his face, a little, which no one mentions because everyone here looks one minor inconvenience away from becoming a cautionary tale. On the table sits the phrase. Not physically, obviously. Nobody has trapped language in a jar, but it feels that way. 3 Hebrew words hang over the room like smoke. B'nai ha-Elohim, sons of God. There it is. Small phrase, huge problem. The sort of wording that strolls into human history, flips over a chair, and leaves generations fighting beside the wreckage. One old teacher taps the line with a fingernail. Not hard, just enough to make everyone look. He leans in, beard smelling faintly of lentils and lamp smoke, and says the words slowly, as if careful pronunciation might force the heavens to cooperate. B'nai ha-Elohim. Around him, several men make the same face people make when a jar lid refuses to open. You know the one. Eyebrows narrowed, mouth pinched. A look that says, this should not be this difficult. And yet, here we are. One man hears heavenly beings. He hears the same kind of title used for members of the divine court, beings who belong above, and definitely not in your village, marrying human women and producing giant sons with terrible reputations. To him, the phrase opens upward, the ceiling gets higher, the shadows lengthen. The whole passage turns into cosmic trespass, celestial rebellion, and a world where the sky itself has started behaving inappropriately. You can see why that reading has followers. It crackles. It has teeth. Another man across the table reacts like he has just bitten into spoiled cheese. No, he insists. No wings. No cosmic nonsense. He hears rulers, nobles, men with power using divine language about themselves because men with power have always adored titles that make them sound one management seminar away from godhood. To him, the phrase drags everything back down into the dirt, where the monsters are human, the marriages are coercive, and the horror wears a signet ring. That reading also has teeth, just fewer feathers. And then there is the third sort, the man who folds his hands and says the phrase with pained patience. Sons of God, yes, but covenant sons, godly line, descendants of Seth. Men from one family line crossing over and marrying the daughters of another, collapsing a boundary that was moral rather than biological. No angels, no royal propaganda, just faithful people losing their way through appetite, compromise, and very bad matchmaking. He says it like a man trying to keep the floor from collapsing. The room does not reward him. Somebody snorts. Somebody else starts rubbing his forehead like this interpretation has given him a headache behind the eyes. In the corner, a copyist keeps working, but slower now, because even he wants to hear this. Nobody says it out loud, but everybody knows what's at stake. Change the phrase, and the whole room changes with it. Same verse, different universe. You watch them weigh words like merchants in a spice market. Not casually, never casually. A merchant handling cinnamon knows one careless motion loses money. These men handle language like that. They turn terms over in the light. They mutter parallels. They compare how a word behaves in one passage and then in another. They taste syllables. They test them against memory. Hebrew on one side, Greek on the other, and somewhere in the middle, your sanity quietly packs a bag. A translator with cracked nails and excellent eyebrows lifts his stylus. He isn't deciding between synonyms. He's deciding whether the passage walks like a horror tale, a political indictment, or a family catastrophe. That is not a footnote problem. That is a whole architecture problem. Change one beam, and the roof above every reader shifts. Suddenly, children hear one kind of warning instead of another. Preachers thunder in one direction instead of the next. Artists paint giants, or kings, or respectable genealogies gone rancid. The phrase sits there, smug as ever. Bene ha Elohim. You can almost hate it. Across from you lies a Greek copy, stretched open and weighted at the edges so it doesn't curl shut in protest. The parchment is smooth in some places, rough in others. It smells like skin, because it is skin, which is an unsettling detail everyone has agreed not to dwell on. The Greek letters march across it in neat, dark rows, and there it is again, the translator's gamble made visible. In one tradition, the phrase becomes angels of God. That is not a tiny decision. That is opening the front door and letting the supernatural walk right into Genesis 6, wearing muddy sandals. Suddenly, the old strange reading gets official support in another language. Suddenly, the passage sounds even less like a dynastic marriage dispute, and more like your neighborhood is one full moon away from becoming an exorcism site. No wonder some readers embrace it. No wonder others start sweating. Because once sons of God becomes angels of God, the room fills with extra furniture. You now have heavenly rebellion, boundary violations, giant offspring, and all the grim atmosphere of later stories growing around it like mold on damp bread. Forbidden knowledge shows up. Watchers loom. The pre-flood world starts to feel less like ordinary wickedness and more like creation itself has slipped a gear. And once that furniture is in the room, good luck getting it back out. But not everyone wants angels at the wedding. Some men hear the Greek choice and make the same expression your face makes when someone adds fish sauce to a recipe you were not consulted on. They want restraint. They want the language tethered. They want Genesis 6 to remain human-sized, even if human-sized still includes violence, abuse, and towering men with legendary reputations. They don't want every shadow in the passage to sprout wings, so they push back, hard. A rabbi near the wall has a habit of repeating the phrase under his breath while staring into nothing, which is either deep concentration or the first stage of collapse. He's thinking in Hebrew, arguing in Aramaic, listening to Greek, and aging visibly with each pass. You can see his thumb blackened from rolling the edge of the scroll. His lips move. His forehead shines with sweat. He looks like a man trying to defuse a bomb made of grammar. The phrase keeps refusing to behave. Because language is rude that way. Sometimes a title means one thing in one setting and another elsewhere. Sometimes old phrases carry a family resemblance, but not an identical face. Sometimes a word enters a sentence with all its bags packed from previous appearances, and sometimes it shows up reinventing itself, very inconsiderate, very common. Every translator in the room knows this, which is why none of them are speaking with the confidence of men discussing barley prices. This is not barley. Barley is easy. A church father in a later century sits in another room entirely, but you can feel him join the fight. Different lamps, different city, same smell of wax, dust, and overused brains. He reads the line and frowns. By now, stories about angels taking wives have become spiritually inconvenient. People love the dramatic version, naturally. People always do. Give humanity a choice between corrupt local rulers and forbidden unions producing giant warriors, and half the room will pick the monster movie before you finish clearing your throat. So he tries to fence the passage in. No, he says, these are not angels. Angels do not marry. They are not reproducing. They are not starting households and paying dowries and raising giant sons who punch holes through doors. This must be humans. Seth's line, perhaps. Godly men mixing with ungodly women, or nobles behaving like predators. Keep it on earth. Keep it morally legible. Keep people from turning Genesis into a campfire tale with too many teeth. You understand his concern. You also understand why the dramatic reading survives anyway. Because once you have pictured the oldest interpretation, it sticks. You have already lived in that section. You have felt the dread of the sky leaning down too close. You have seen the giant men looming in village memory. You have smelled the rot of a world corrupted from top to bottom. That does not wash off quickly. The angel reading has the grip of a nightmare that refuses to leave after breakfast. But the human readings have their own stubborn power, because they sound familiar. Too familiar, actually. Elite men taking whomever they want. Holy lines collapsing into compromise. Powerful households expanding by appetite. Girls becoming bargaining pieces. Violence wrapped in legal language. Men acquiring women the way a collector acquires land. Donkeys and decorative items nobody asked for. That reading doesn't need wings to terrify you. It just needs history and a functioning memory. So now the room is split, and everyone is holding a scroll like it might settle the matter. It will not. One reader points to other places where similar wording sounds divine. Another points to kings who use God language because rulers have never met a flattering title they didn't immediately try on. Another reaches for the broader flood context and says the point is corruption, not creature taxonomy. Somebody else starts talking about the ancient world's giant traditions, and the room groans because now this debate has brought friends. The lamps burn lower. Oil thickens in the dish. Smoke gathers in the beams overhead. The place smells increasingly like hot metal, singed wick, old wool, and human fatigue. A man near the door stretches his back and sounds like dry reeds breaking. Another cracks his knuckles with the solemnity of a ritual. They are all exhausted, but no one leaves because nobody wants the phrase making decisions unattended. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about. Translation is not clean. It is not a serene little exercise where calm geniuses sit beneath perfect light and render exact meanings while birds sing outside. Absolutely not. It is sweaty. It is cramped. It is one smudged letter from disaster. A scribe squints because the exemplar is damaged. Another has to decide whether a faded mark is part of a word or a stain left by some previous owner's lunch. Somebody's eyesight is failing. Somebody's patience already failed 2 hours ago. Meanwhile, the phrase remains compact and infuriating. One choice, and Genesis 6 becomes the ancient equivalent of a locked-door horror film. Another choice, and it becomes a grim case file on aristocratic abuse. Another, and it turns into the collapse of covenant identity through marriage and moral compromise. Same 4 verses, different nightmares. You watch an older translator pause with his stylus above the page. His hand trembles a little, either from age or hunger, or the awareness that words do not stay put once released. He knows whatever he writes will travel. It will be copied by hands he will never meet. Read aloud in rooms he will never enter. It will settle into minds, sermons, arguments, paintings, nightmares, marginal notes, and very confident speeches by people who do not know how many hours he spent sweating over one line. No pressure. Outside, somebody leads a donkey past the building, and the animal lets out a noise like a trumpet being strangled. No one even glances up. They are beyond distraction now. One man has reached the stage of debate where he pinches the bridge of his nose and speaks through his hand. Another is jabbing at a column with such intensity you fear for the parchment. A third keeps saying the phrase with tiny changes of emphasis, hoping one of them will suddenly unlock the whole thing. It does not. Because the words are ancient, and ancient words love making modern certainty look silly. A younger student who has so far been silent finally asks the obvious question. If this phrase can open several worlds, how do you know which world you are meant to enter? The room goes very still. Even the man with the dangerous finger pauses. It is a good question. An irritatingly good question. The sort that earns respect and annoyance in equal measure. No one answers quickly. One teacher finally gestures to the whole passage, not with smugness, but weariness. You do not choose a world by one phrase alone. You listen to the mood of the chapter. You watch where the story is going. You ask what kind of corruption is filling the earth. You ask what sort of warning belongs before the flood. Is this boundary breaking from heaven downward? Is it tyranny from the powerful downward? Is it compromise from the faithful outward into ruin? Every answer changes the weather. If the phrase sounds divine, then Genesis 6 feels like creation itself is cracking along cosmic seams. The flood approaches a world infected from above and below, a place where heavenly and earthly boundaries have been trampled flat. If the phrase sounds royal, the chapter becomes brutally social. It is the old story of powerful men taking because they can, filling the earth with violence while everyone smaller pays for it. If the phrase sounds covenantal, then the dread comes from erosion. The line meant to remain distinct dissolves into the wider flood of corruption, and one more barrier gives way before the waters do. That is why everyone is sweating over nouns. Not because they are boring, but because they are dangerous. Words this small can reroute an entire imagination. A child hearing the passage in one translation grows up fearing proud kings. In another, he fears fallen heavenly beings. In another, he learns that holiness can be diluted. One marriage, one compromise, one appetite at a time. The warning shifts. The villains shift. The genre shifts. Monster tale, court scandal, social indictment, family collapse. Pick carefully. They all keep trying. Centuries pass like pages turning. In one room, rabbis preserve the phrase with fierce loyalty to the Hebrew, unwilling to smooth over its strangeness too quickly. In another, Greek-speaking readers inherit a version already leaning toward angels and build a whole haunted neighborhood around it. In later halls, Christian writers push back and forth, some embracing the older supernatural terror, others locking the door against it and throwing the key into Seth's family tree. Nobody gets the final word uncontested. Of course not. Humans hear an ambiguous phrase and react the way gulls react to dropped bread. Loudly, competitively, and with very little dignity. But there is something almost tender in the struggle. You see it when a scribe carefully copies a line he does not fully solve. He does not fix the problem by force. He preserves it. He lets the next generation wrestle too. That takes humility, though no one in this room would use such a pretty word for what currently feels like collective exasperation. Still, there it is. They keep handing on the knot instead of cutting it with a cheap knife. That matters, because some passages are meant to stay sharp. Genesis 6 does not let you stroll past thinking the world before the flood was merely a little rowdy. No. However you translate it, something has gone badly wrong. Boundaries are collapsing. Desire is taking what it wants. Power is swelling beyond its proper shape. Famous men are growing in the wreckage. The earth is becoming the sort of place where every road feels less safe than yesterday. The phrase is disputed. The warning is not. By now, the room is darker. Lamps hiss softly. The ink has begun to thicken in its dish. Somebody's stomach growls loud enough to interrupt a quotation. No one laughs, though several look offended on behalf of concentration. A servant brings watered wine and bread with the texture of roofing material. They eat without joy. Crumbs fall on the table. A man brushes them away from the scroll with the panic of one who has watched mice ruin precious things. Still, they keep going. One more comparison. One more argument. One more muttered repetition of Bene Ha Elohim, while fingers trace letters cut long ago. The phrase has become larger than itself now. It carries every fear of a collapsing world, every instinct about where evil enters, every effort to say exactly what sort of horror stands on the threshold of the flood. And you feel, standing there in smoke and sweat and muttering, why this fight lasted. Because this is never just translation. It is atmosphere. It is theology with dirty fingernails. It is whether the door in Genesis 6 opens into heaven's rebellion, palace abuse, or the slow rot of a compromised people. It is whether the giants outside feel like the children of cosmic trespass or the trophies of human tyranny. It is whether the chapter should be read by torchlight like a nightmare or by daylight like an indictment handed to corrupt men in expensive robes. Sometimes it is both. That is the truly irritating part. The phrase may refuse to choose only one flavor of dread. Ancient language can do that. It can hold a line in a way that makes every interpreter slightly miserable and every reader deeply alert. The world before the flood may be monstrous in more than one direction at once. Heaven too close, kings too hungry, families too porous, violence everywhere. Reputation inflated, bodies weaponized, limits ignored, a complete disaster. So you stand in the dim room while one more scribe bends over one more copy, trying with stained fingers and aching eyes to carry the strangeness forward without flattening it. The lamps flicker over leather and skin. Outside, evening presses against the shutters. Inside, the words remain alive, difficult, and far more dangerous than they look. And from that cramped little table, several worlds keep spreading outward. "Keep your head down," somebody mutters, grabbing your sleeve as the crowd shifts. You almost do, until you realize everyone else is doing the exact opposite. Heads tilted up, eyes narrowed, necks craned. The whole village has that dreadful, excited energy people get when a cart overturns or two rich men start shouting in public. Dust hangs in the heat. Sweat crawls down your ribs. Somewhere nearby, a goat is chewing rope with the calm confidence of a creature unconcerned by human catastrophe. And looming over all of it are the names everybody remembers. The giant figures, the strong men, the living warnings with excellent branding and appalling consequences. You hear the names before you see anyone attached to them. That is how these men work. Their reputation arrives first, stomping ahead like a herald with bad manners. Mothers hiss at noisy boys to hush, or one of the mighty men will hear. Old men at the gate mutter about ancient fights, shattered shields, and bodies left in wadis for the birds. Teenagers try to stand like them, shoulders back, jaw set, as if posture alone can turn you into a legend. It cannot. Mostly, it turns you into a teenager standing weirdly in the sun. But the legends keep swelling anyway. Every retelling adds another cubit, another victory, another story about a spear so heavy, normal people needed 2 hands just to drag it across a courtyard. Memory gets bigger around these men because everyone is impressed by size. Big bodies, big voices, big appetites, big piles of dead enemies. It is a culture with the spiritual maturity of a crowd watching professional wrestling and deciding the loudest person must also be the wisest. Your first clue that this whole arrangement is unhealthy is that nobody talks about these men as comforting. Admired? Yes. Feared? Certainly. Sung about? Absolutely. But comforting? Not a chance. Nobody says, "Ah, wonderful, the giant warlord is coming. At last we can all relax." No one sees a mountain of a man with scarred arms and a weapon like a fence post and thinks, "Now there is a fellow who will improve the mood at supper." No, the mood gets worse. You feel it in the market. Conversation stutters when one of the famous households sends servants through. Women gather children closer without making a scene about it. Men suddenly become fascinated by baskets, sandals, cracks in walls, anything that allows them not to make direct eye contact. Even the donkeys seem tense, and donkeys are usually too self-absorbed to care about anything except hay and revenge. The word floating over all this is Nephilim. It lands heavy, awkward, unsettling. People say it like they're spitting out grit. Some say it with awe, some with disgust, some with the exhausted shrug of people who have accepted that the world is full of unpleasant surprises, and this is just one more. You don't get a tidy explanation. You get fragments, half-whispered stories, gestures describing height, hands spread wide to indicate shoulders like doors, arguments over whether the name means fallen ones or those who make others fall, or simply the kind of men who enter a room and reduce everyone else to furniture. None of the options are encouraging, and now we arrive at the part nobody talks about enough. Living among giants is not glamorous. It sounds glamorous in songs. In songs, everybody is gleaming. Sweat becomes noble effort. Blood becomes honor. Broken teeth somehow become character development. But in real life, giant men are expensive, loud, hungry, and bad for infrastructure. Doorways are too small, beds are too short, horses look offended. Clay cups vanish in massive hands like children's toys. Every object in the house seems one careless movement away from becoming shards on the floor. And they eat. Dear God, they eat. You bring out bread, dried figs, lentils, roasted grain, maybe a little oil if the household can spare it, and it disappears like tribute tossed into a furnace. A normal family meal turns into a military supply problem. The big men tear through food with the concentration of wolves. Elbows fly, bones crack, jugs empty. Then someone belches with the force of a weather event, and you still have to find enough barley for tomorrow. This is fame with table manners from a nightmare. But hunger is only part of it. The real thing people remember is violence. These are mighty men, men of old, men of renown. The phrase sounds polished, almost ceremonial, until you stand close enough to smell what it costs. Leather dark with old sweat, bronze greaves rubbed raw at the straps, scars puckering over knuckles, shoulders, ribs. The stale iron tang clinging to a blade that has been cleaned but not enough. You do not get called mighty in this world by being wonderfully supportive during difficult emotional conversations. You get called mighty because people stop breathing when you enter a fight. That reputation spreads because violence travels faster than grain prices. Somebody kills 3 men in a dispute over pasture land, and by the next week the tale has turned into 12. A raiding party burns a settlement, and by winter every child within 50 miles has heard about the champion who laughed while gates splintered. Facts don't exactly survive the trip. They get flattened, stretched, and rolled in dramatic seasoning, like meat rubbed with salt. The result is renown, which sounds so nice, doesn't it? Renown. As if we're talking about a tasteful award presented at a banquet. In practice, it means everyone knows your name because your existence has made a lot of other lives shorter and worse. Ancient celebrity is not a charming little interview circuit. It is songs, terror, trophies, and widows. It is the whole region knowing what your spear does to a human chest. Excellent branding, appalling consequences. You hear old fighters tell these stories with that haunted brightness men get when they survived something terrible and can't decide whether to boast or vomit. They sit on low stools, rubbing bad knees, picking at bread with thick fingers. And once the wine starts moving, so do the memories. One giant split a shield from top to bottom. Another tore a man off a chariot. Another ran all day in armor and still had enough breath to kill at sunset. Everyone listening leans in. You do too, against your better judgment. That is part of the problem. Horror and fascination live in the same room and share snacks. You know these stories are bad for the soul. You know they glorify men who leave villages smoking behind them. But the image of overwhelming strength hooks into the mind. Your imagination starts sketching shoulders like city gates, hands like mallets, legs like tree trunks. The body becomes legend, and legend makes room for more violence. Soon, a man is no longer just strong. He is larger than life, then larger than memory, then larger than truth. Children play at being him. Bards praise him. Rulers want him on their side. Fathers name sons after him in the touching and completely misguided hope that maybe this household too can produce a human battering ram. The whole culture starts confusing destructive capacity with greatness. You can feel the air thicken with it. Every story gets louder. Every standard gets uglier. Gentle men look small. Patient men look weak. Kindness has no publicist. And the women carrying water past all this still have to keep living. That matters. Because the legends may center on giant men, but everyone else pays the rent on their fame. You see it in households that go quiet when heavy steps pass outside. In wives counting jars, because the strongmen and their retainers have eaten through another month's stores. In girls warned not to stare, not to speak, not to be noticed. In boys pushed too early toward hardness because softness is now treated like a defect. A world obsessed with violent men becomes exhausting to inhabit. Your shoulders stay tight all the time. Your sleep goes bad. Every public gathering has the potential to become a demonstration of dominance by someone who thinks being feared is a personality. Feast days turn into stage events for powerful bodies. Wrestling matches draw crowds. Boasts get traded. Old scars are displayed like party tricks. Somewhere, a musician tries to keep the mood festive while half the room silently calculates escape routes. And the smell is unbelievable. Oil, wine, stale meat, trampled herbs, human breath, old blood worked into leather, and that hot metal odor from sun-baked weapons. Add in dust, dung, and too many men in one courtyard, and you have the ancient equivalent of a locker room attached to a slaughterhouse. You wipe your face with your sleeve and immediately regret it, because your sleeve now smells like somebody else's shield strap. Still, renown shines over all of it like cheap bronze polished for a parade. Men of renown, men whose names get remembered. That sounds impressive, until you ask remembered for what? Not for mending things, not for protecting the weak without theatrics, not for feeding the hungry, settling disputes gently, or showing restraint when they could have crushed somebody. Their fame is built from impact, breaking, taking, winning, leaving marks large enough that nobody forgets them. It's the ancient version of becoming famous because every town has a crater where you used to stand. People love to say, they were heroes. Well, heroes according to whom? Stand beside the mothers burying sons, and the word starts to smell funny. Stand in a field after the fighters have gone through, and see crushed grain, broken carts, sandals in the mud without feet still in them. Stand at a doorway where a woman is scrubbing blood out of the threshold with ash and water because she still has to cook there tomorrow. Hero starts sounding like one of those words polished by people who didn't have to mop afterward. So the stories of the giants do two things at once. They impress you and they wear you out. That is the strange fatigue hanging over this whole world before the flood. Everything is inflated. Bodies are bigger. Desires are bigger. Reputations are bigger. Violence is bigger. Even memory itself feels swollen, like a river rising past its banks and carrying mud into every room. Nobody is content with ordinary limits anymore. Ordinary strength is not enough. Ordinary marriage is not enough. Ordinary authority is not enough. The whole age is addicted to more. More height, more force, more name. You can feel what that does to a society. Every boy grows up under a billboard made of muscle and menace. Every ruler wants stronger enforcers. Every clan wants their own giant, their own champion, their own living weapon to drag family honor through the mud and call it glory. Songs keep score. Boasts multiply. Graves multiply faster. The famous get bigger in the mouth while the ordinary disappear by the dozen underfoot. Your world becomes physically intimidating and morally exhausted at the same time. That combination is miserable. You walk through streets where every wall seems to have ears, and every courtyard might be attached to some strong man's household. You hear laughter, and can't tell whether it's celebration or menace. You see broad shadows crossing an alley and instinctively step aside. Your own body feels terribly breakable. Ribs, wrists, neck, all the little fragile parts suddenly very noticeable when a culture worships men built like siege equipment. No wonder people tell giant stories at night. Darkness helps. Firelight stretches shadows. A man describing a champion's reach can use both arms and half the room. Somebody swears the giant's bed had to be custom built. Somebody else claims his spearhead alone weighed more than a child. Another says he once saw a warrior knock down 3 men with one swing, which sounds suspicious until you remember enough people in this age are built like threshing sledges that perhaps, regrettably, yes. And once the stories start, they do not shrink. The dead stay dangerous in memory. Their names walk around long after their bodies are gone. That may be part of what makes these mighty men so oppressive. You cannot escape them by waiting for them to die. Their fame lingers. The children of those who feared them still repeat the stories. Their violence settles into the culture like smoke in wool. Even after the man is buried, the smell remains. That is what renown really is here. Not just being known. Being impossible to forget, even when forgetting would improve everybody's quality of life. So you sit at the edge of the fire, listening to another tale about giants and heroes and ancient killers with glamorous nicknames, and you feel the room respond in the old divided way. The young look thrilled. The old look tired. The women look busy with their hands and not fooled for a second. The dogs under the table gnaw bones in peace, displaying more moral clarity than half the men in the courtyard. Outside, the night presses close. You can hear insects, a baby crying in another house, someone coughing up dust. Farther off, the bark of dogs reacting to footsteps on the road. Every ordinary sound feels small against the weight of these names. The mighty men of old, men of renown. Their legend sits on the world like a large, unpleasant guest who has overstayed by several generations and is now criticizing the stew. But the longer you stay in this age, the more you notice that renown is doing the opposite of saving anyone. It does not make homes safer. It does not make fields fruitful. It does not make fathers gentler or rulers wiser. It certainly does not make the earth less soaked with harm. Fame here is not a light. It is heat without comfort. It bakes the ground hard. It cracks whatever tenderness still survives. It teaches people to admire the very qualities making the world unbearable. And that is why these giant names hang over the chapter like storm clouds with excellent publicists. They are not there to make the age look glorious. They make it look swollen, distorted. Human beings bulked up in all the wrong directions. Strength detached from goodness. Memory detached from mercy. Greatness measured in intimidation, which is a marvelous way to build a civilization if your goal is to have everyone eventually need therapy, and no one has invented therapy. So you leave the fire with those stories still stuck to your skin. The air outside is cooler, but not cleaner. Dust, animal stink, smoke from banked coals, and the faint sour drift of refuse sit in the lane like a blanket no one had the decency to wash. Overhead, the stars look clear and indifferent. Somewhere in the dark, men are still boasting. Somewhere else, someone is barring a door. The names of the mighty keep floating through the night, too famous to ignore and too ugly to trust. And beneath all that fame, the world is getting thinner. People are wearing out. The earth is wearing out. The old boundaries have been stepped on, broken, laughed at, and turned into drinking songs. Violence has become entertainment with a genealogy. Reputation has become a weapon. The great men are great in exactly the way a falling wall is great. Impressive for one terrible moment, and then everyone nearby has to dig through the wreckage. But the morning isn't over yet. The air itself is beginning to feel strained. The age of giant names is not just noisy, it is a warning. And before the rain comes, you can already smell that something in the whole world has started to rot. The smell changes before the sky does. You leave the stories of giants and strong men behind, and the air itself feels meaner. Not louder, exactly. Louder was earlier, when people still thought noise meant life. This is the sound of a place stretched too far. Babies crying behind thin walls, men shouting over grain prices, a woman arguing with her brother in the alley because somebody's daughter has been promised to somebody unpleasant again. And whether the trouble started in heaven, in palaces, or in ordinary homes, the result is the same. The whole world begins to feel used up. You feel it in your bones before anybody says it out loud. The village well is crowded as usual, but the mood has gone sour. Every conversation sounds like the beginning of a feud. Someone is muttering about a field line moved in the night. Someone else swears his cousin's goats were taken, not lost. Two old women speak in that sharp whisper old women have perfected over decades, which is somehow quieter than a shout and much more devastating. Nobody trusts anybody's sons. Nobody trusts anybody's story. You stand there with your water jar and the rumors come at you like flies. This family has men too quick to anger. That household has daughters sent away in tears. Those brothers up the hill came back with bronze blades, new wives, and a look in their eyes suggesting the neighbors should sleep lightly. Every bit of gossip has teeth. The earth is full now, not full in the cheerful sense, not bustling, not thriving, not what a vibrant community, full like a cooking pot left too long over the fire until the foam slides over the rim, full like a room with too many bodies and not enough windows, full like a house after a family fight where nobody opens the door and the smell of stew, sweat, damp wool and resentment just sits there. Human life has become thin and loud. You see old men who should have been honored shoved aside at the gate. You see boys trying to become legends before they become adults, swaggering around with spears too large for their shoulders. You see fathers looking tired in a way that has gone past sleep deprivation and entered spiritual mildew. Mothers keep households together with dough, thread, and rage. The whole place runs on appetite now. People take. That is the rhythm. They take land, women, livestock, servants, credit, honor, revenge. Every desire shows up dressed like a right. Every strong hand assumes it was made to close around someone else's throat, or purse, or daughter. You can feel the old order of things getting kicked in the ribs. Even the sky seems exhausted by it. Morning comes hot and white. Dust rises with every sandal and hangs in the air like the world has been ground down into powder. The olive trees look tired. The sheep are skinny. The donkeys have that patient, offended expression donkeys always wear. But now it feels earned. They have watched humanity for generations and appear ready to file a complaint. Then comes the hard word that lands like a stone in a basin. Human days will not go on like this forever. You hear it repeated in fragments, half prayer and half warning. 120 years, not endless, Not the old sprawling ages where people live and breed and build and brawl for centuries, piling grievance on top of grievance like children stacking rocks badly. The breath of life, once stretched over vast lifetimes, will be tightened, limited, measured. You can feel people react to that news in real time. Some scoff. Of course they do. Men with good teeth and violent hobbies always scoff first. They laugh into their cups and slap each other on the back, smelling of stale beer, garlic, and bad ideas. They hear a limit and decide it applies to someone else. Other people go very quiet. A limit means accountability has entered the room. A limit means the world is not an all-you-can-devour buffet. You cannot just keep grabbing at life with both fists forever, stuffing your house with stolen comfort and your memory with ugly victories. A limit means the landlord is finally checking the property, and the property is in shocking condition. Walls cracked, roof leaking, blood in the courtyard, absolutely no chance of the deposit being returned. You walk through the market and the tension sticks to your skin. The bread sellers are already irritable because the flour is poor this season. Barley loaves sit on reed trays like compact bricks of disappointment. You buy one and immediately regret it. It has the texture of a roofing tile and tastes faintly of smoke, grit, and somebody's optimistic guess at acorn meal. Nobody is in a patient mood. A man selling oil claims his measures are honest. They are not. A customer notices. Voices rise. Nearby, a butcher hacks through a joint with enough aggression to suggest he's imagining someone's neck. Blood runs into the packed dirt, and the flies arrive in professional formation, delighted to be included. Every trade feels like extortion with props. Children dart through the crowd with the energy of creatures one bad meal away from crying and one insult away from biting. Dogs nose around for scraps. A woman grips her basket tighter when a group of young men passes. They are handsome in that useless way dangerous men often are, all strong arms and easy grins and the emotional depth of a dropped stone. People call them mighty. That is the problem. The world has started admiring the wrong things with real enthusiasm. Height, force, reputation, the ability to make others afraid. You hear names repeated the way later ages will repeat celebrities, athletes, generals, and influencers, except these famous men solve every inconvenience with a spear. Somebody says one of them killed 3 brothers in a dispute over grazing rights. The tone is admiration. You want to fling a turnip at him. Renown has become a disease. And now we arrive at the part nobody likes admitting. Violence is no longer surprising. That is when a world gets truly sick, not when cruelty appears. Cruelty has been showing up since Cain lost his temper in a field. No, the rot deepens when everyone starts adjusting around it. When mothers teach children which streets to avoid after dark. When neighbors hear screams and keep needing bread. When an armed man passes and everybody studies their sandals very carefully because making eye contact sounds like work. You feel it in ordinary movements. A doorbar dropped a little earlier at night. A hand lingering near a knife while talking to strangers. A bride's family watching the road with tight faces. Shepherds bringing flocks in closer because raiders have become ambitious and apparently very committed to being the worst. This is not one bad household. This is weather now. It settles over everything. Quarrels become beatings. Desires become seizures. Pride becomes monuments with unpaid labor and a death count nobody can remember correctly. The big men get bigger. The weak get quieter. And all the while the earth keeps receiving whatever people do to each other, like a floor nobody bothers to clean, because they assume tomorrow will be someone else's problem. The ground has seen too much. You notice that when you leave the road and pass the fields. At first they look ordinary enough, furrows, stones, a few bent workers with scarves around their heads against the heat. But the longer you stand there, the more the land feels burdened. Soil trampled by too many feet. Boundary markers shifted by greed. Harvests fought over before they are even brought in. Sweat everywhere, and not the honest kind alone. The earth is tired of being used as evidence. There is a difference between filling the world and spoiling it. And people have become weirdly committed to missing that difference. The command to be fruitful has been dragged through mud and returned wearing a villain mustache. Multiplication without mercy, dominion without care, desire without boundary. Its creation order run through a grain mill until all that's left is hot dust and splinters. Even family life feels unsafe now. You sit in the shade of a wall one afternoon, chewing dates that are mostly pit and listening to nearby voices carry through open courtyards. A mother hisses at her son not to go with those men again. A father demands to know where his daughter has been seen. Somebody is arranging a marriage with the tone of a livestock transaction. Somebody else is mourning a girl who has not died but might as well have, because once she is taken into that house, she is not coming back the same. Every home has a version of the story. A brother gone hard, a husband gone cruel, a father gone greedy, a son with too much strength and not enough fear, a household that rose quickly and now terrifies the lane, a feast that ended in blood, a bargain everyone regrets. The details change, the smell doesn't. Cooked grain, lamp smoke, old sweat, and dread. You begin to understand why the world itself feels offended. Animals pick up on it before people do. They always do. The dogs startle easily. Horses roll their eyes and toss their heads at nothing visible. Sheep crowd together in that deeply unflattering way sheep have, as if panic itself has become contagious. Birds start from trees at sudden shouting. Oxen stand in their yokes as if reconsidering every life choice that led them here. Creation is bracing. By evening, the heat backs off, but the relief is a scam. Fires are lit. Meat spits over coals. Children finally sleep. Men drink. That is when boasting starts. Wounds displayed. Feuds retold. Victories enlarged by 20% with each refill. The mighty men become even mightier once everyone is mildly fermented and no one present values accuracy. You sit at the edge of the light and hear the future flood earning its paycheck. One man brags about taking what he wanted because no one could stop him. Another laughs about the house he burned over an insult. Someone praises a warrior for making his name feared in 3 valleys. Around the circle are nods, grins, eager faces. This is what passes for glory, not wisdom, not justice, not gentleness. Just the ancient version of a viral clip of somebody ruining lives and calling it strength. No wonder the nights feel heavy. The dark should be for rest, but rest has become difficult in a world where power roams. You lie down on a mat thin enough to qualify as a personal insult. The straw underneath smells of dust, mice, and old feet. Through the wall, you hear a baby fussing, a couple arguing, a drunk singing 3 notes with total confidence and no success, and somewhere farther off the unmistakable sound of someone getting hurt. Nobody goes to help. That may be the saddest sound of all. Morning comes again, and nothing improves. 3 days pass. Still no improvement. The same grim traffic moves along the road. The same men posture at the gate. The same women calculate danger with one glance and adjust their route. The same children learn, far too young, that the loudest person usually gets his way. Human life keeps going, but it has become thin in the way old cloth goes thin. Hold it to the light, and you can see straight through the places where strength used to be. That is what corruption feels like on the ground. Not abstract evil. Not a villain in dramatic lighting giving a speech from a rock. It is daily life losing its shape, boundaries rubbed off, appetites promoted to management, every relationship bent toward use, every gift made heavy, marriage turned into seizure, strength turned into menace, fame turned into proof of damage done. The world is not merely sinful. It is worn out by sinning. You can almost smell that weariness rising from the streets in the afternoon heat. Dung baking near walls, rot in the drains, sweat drying in wool tunics, fish left too long in the market, the metallic tang of blood where an animal was slaughtered, or perhaps not an animal, and nobody seems eager to clarify. Civilization has become one enormous courtyard that urgently needs scrubbing, and nobody intends to fetch water. Then the deeper grief settles over everything. The Maker looks at this world and is not entertained, not impressed by the mighty men, not flattered by cities, not dazzled by bronze tools, strong sons, or songs about conquest. You feel that divine sorrow like pressure in the air before a storm, the kind that makes animals uneasy and old people stop mid-sentence and stare at the horizon. Something has gone wrong all the way down. It is not one crime. It is not one marriage, one dynasty, one band of monsters, one ugly generation having a rough season. The thoughts of human hearts have curdled. What spills out into streets and homes and fields was already brewing inside. The world outside has become a public display of the world within, and let me tell you, the exhibit is not going well. Every imagination seems recruited for harm. A clever man invents a better weapon. A strong man finds a weaker target. A household head devises a new way to increase his own comfort at everyone else's expense. Songs celebrate domination. Stories preserve the names of violent men like treasured heirlooms. Children grow up hearing who matters, and the answer is always the one who can wound most effectively. Even memory has become infected. So by the time you hear of coming judgment, it does not fall into a healthy world like lightning from nowhere. It lands in a place already sagging under itself. A place where the old puzzle of the sons of God is no longer a curiosity tucked in a corner. You can see what it leads into now. Boundaries crossed, taking without restraint, power admired for being power. Human beings acting as though desire itself were permission. That poison spreads. From whatever doorway it entered, it is in the whole house now. You stand at the edge of a field at dusk and look out over the land. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Somewhere a child laughs, and for a second the sound is so clean it hurts. Then a man shouts. A dog barks. A woman slams a door. The evening wind carries dust, ash, and the smell of river water gone sluggish in the heat. The earth feels like it is holding its breath, not because rain has started yet, because mercy has lingered so long in a place determined to mistake patience for approval, because generations have spent the kindness of God like fools spending an inheritance on wine, vanity, and sharpened metal, because every act of taking has piled onto the next, until the whole civilization smells like a room where something died under the floorboards, and everybody keeps pretending it's the onions. You know that smell. Sweet, rotten, impossible to ignore once noticed. That is the world now. And somewhere in this used-up, violent, exhausted creation, one man is still building a boat in dry land while his neighbors laugh, and the first hammer blows sound less absurd with every passing day. Still arguing about that passage? Somebody mutters, rolling up a scroll with the tired disgust of a man who has heard the same fight for 40 years. And yes, they are. So after all of that, what is this strange old warning doing in your bones? By the time you step back from the dust, the marriages, the giant reputations, and the pre-flood grime, the point starts to come into focus. Not neat, not polished, more like a shape appearing through smoke. Genesis puts those strange 4 verses right before the flood for a reason. You are supposed to feel that something in the world has gone badly crooked, not quirky crooked, catastrophic crooked. First comes the oldest, weirdest possibility, the sons of God as heavenly beings, crossing into human life like terrible neighbors, climbing through your window at midnight. It leaves you with one feeling immediately: boundary violation. That is the heartbeat of it. The line between heaven and earth, creature and creature, power and proper place, gets trampled flat. The world was made with order in it, distinctions, limits, rooms with walls. Then somebody smashes through all of that like a drunk man looking for the latrine. That reading stuck around because it captures the horror of a world where even the sky is no longer behaving itself. It tells you the corruption before the flood is not small. It is not a few people being rude at market. It is creation itself feeling invaded. When the story is read that way, you are meant to feel the deep wrongness of power entering a place it was never meant to enter and taking what it wants. That matters a lot. But then there is the other reading, the one with fewer wings and more sandals. Maybe these sons of God are rulers, nobles, dynastic men, the sort of people who have servants, land, sharp elbows, and absolutely no habit of hearing the word no. That version lands differently, but it lands hard. Suddenly, the scene is not cosmic horror. It is human power behaving exactly like human power behaves when nobody stops it. Which, frankly, is still a nightmare. There, the taking of women is the pointy end of the whole problem. Men with status see, desire, and seize. Households become machines for appetite. Daughters become trophies. Marriage becomes acquisition with incense. The world before the flood starts to look like a place where strength has replaced goodness so thoroughly that nobody even bothers pretending otherwise. And that reading stuck around too, because people know that world. They have always known that world. So one thing keeps pressing on your chest, no matter which way you take the phrase: power without restraint ruins everything it touches. Whether that power drops from heaven in rebellion or struts around earth in expensive belts, the result is the same. The strong take, the vulnerable pay, the air gets foul. The ground itself seems tired of hosting the whole performance. By the time you reach the Nephilim and the mighty men of old, men of renown, the story gives you another ugly little truth. Fame is not the same as goodness. Renown is not righteousness. A name everyone knows can still belong to a terrible person. Ancient people were as vulnerable to this as we are. Big men, violent men, impressive men, men with stories attached to them like banners. the sort of figures who walk into a room and make everybody stare. And Genesis is deeply unimpressed. It mentions their renown without kneeling to it. That is such an important detail. The world may build monuments to force. Songs may cling to conquerors. Mothers may hush children with the names of famous warriors. But the passage places all of that swagger in a chapter headed toward judgment. That is the storytellers clearing their throat and saying very calmly, yes, everybody knew these men. And that was not a compliment. So when it all settles, the whole episode feels less like a random monster cameo and more like a warning flare. Human life has become disordered from top to bottom. Marriage is twisted. Desire is unruled. Power is predatory. Reputation has been handed to the brutal. Even the categories of the world feel strained and unstable. It is the kind of moral atmosphere where every room smells faintly of wet wool, old smoke, and bad decisions. You can almost feel why the flood is next. Not because the passage wants to feed curiosity for curiosity's sake. Not because it exists to keep you awake at 2 a.m, arguing about angel anatomy. People have certainly done that, bless them, but that is not the center of gravity here. The center is disorder, a world that no longer knows where the lines are, or worse, knows exactly where they are and stomps over them anyway. That is why the translation war got so fierce, because each choice changes the warning completely. If the sons of God are heavenly beings, the warning is about cosmic rebellion and violated boundaries on a terrifying scale. If they are human rulers, the warning is about tyranny, exploitation, and the way power fattens itself on other people's bodies. If they are the godly line gone bad, the warning is about compromise, collapse, and holiness dissolving into the surrounding rot. Different route, same destination. The world before the flood is not merely busy or sinful in the ordinary shabby way humans usually manage. It has become fundamentally bent. Appetite is in charge, strength is admired, limits are despised, and the famous are famous for all the wrong reasons. That is why these 4 verses keep provoking arguments. They are small, but they sit there like a cracked doorway opening into the whole disaster. Pull on one word, and suddenly you are staring into heaven, palaces, bedrooms, battlefields, and graveyards. No wonder everybody keeps holding the scroll a little closer. And yet, the passage is not preserved to make you despair of humanity as a species of noisy mud gremlins with delusions of grandeur, although there is certainly supporting evidence. It is preserved to make something clear before the waters come. The flood does not arrive in a world that was doing fine 5 minutes earlier. It arrives in a world that has become hostile to order, hostile to restraint, hostile to the goodness woven into creation from the beginning. That placement matters so much. Genesis does not tuck this episode after the flood as a weird campfire tale. It plants it right before judgment, so you will feel the pressure building. The world is full, but not with peace. It is crowded, but not with flourishing. Human life has multiplied, yet what fills the earth is violence, taking, boasting, and the kind of fame that leaves bruises. The problem is not size. It is corruption. So after all the debate, all the muttering over Hebrew and Greek, all the giant anxiety and cosmic dread, the takeaway is surprisingly solid. Boundaries matter because creation is not chaos. Power must be restrained because strength without goodness becomes predation almost instantly. Fame is a lousy moral compass. And when a whole world starts praising appetite, force, and renown, that world is already standing ankle-deep in floodwater, whether it knows it or not. That is what these verses were doing there. They were making you feel the air go bad before the rain began. They were showing you a civilization that had lost the plot so thoroughly that even its heroes were symptoms. Not saviors. Symptoms. The big men, the taking men, the infamous men, the line-crossing men, they are not the glory of the old world. They are the smell of it going rotten. And once you see that, the passage settles. Not into full neatness. It will always keep a little wildness in its beard. But it settles into purpose. You do not have to solve every detail to receive the warning. The point lands either way. A world without limits becomes unlivable. A world impressed by violence becomes sick. A world that confuses renown with goodness is already losing its mind. So the old argument continues, lamps burning low, fingers smudged with ink, somebody sighing loudly in the corner because no one can agree on one loaded phrase. But beneath all that debate, the warning remains steady and clear. The world before the flood did not collapse all at once. It rotted through. And that is why these strange verses endured, wedged there before the rain, stubborn as a splinter and just as hard to ignore. The lamp gutters once, then steadies. Wax runs down the side in a slow, tired slump, and the room smells of smoke, oil, and old parchment. Your fingers rest on the rolled edge of the scroll. The argument has been loud for centuries, but right now, all you hear is a wick faintly hissing and somebody outside dragging sandals through dust. And with the scroll tied shut, the night grows quieter, though the warning remains. You can still feel the whole strange thing hanging in the air. Sons of God, daughters of men, giants with reputations big enough to crush a village before breakfast. 4 little verses, and suddenly everybody is squinting at heaven, at kings, at violent men with too much power and absolutely no supervision. It is a very small passage with the emotional effect of a roof beam cracking over your head. The lamps burn lower, the room cools, ink dries in its shallow dish. A moth throws itself repeatedly at the flame with the confidence of a creature making very poor life choices. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, then another answers, because apparently even the nighttime likes an argument. You sit with the old words anyway. They have lasted because they refuse to flatter anybody. Not the mighty, not the famous, not the men who take what they want and call it strength. Not the culture that gawks at size, noise, conquest and swagger, like those things are impressive instead of exhausting. Genesis 6 leaves that whole performance sitting in the dust where it belongs. You have seen enough now to feel why the warning stayed. A world can become crooked gradually, then all at once. A boundary gets crossed, a daughter gets taken, a strong man becomes a legend. Violence gets a better publicist than kindness. People start treating appetite like destiny and domination like personality. Before long, the whole earth smells wrong, like wet soil, blood, sweat, and a storm not yet visible. That is what lingers. Not just the mystery, though the mystery certainly refuses to pack up and go home. It is still there, stubborn as ever, while scribes, priests, rabbis, readers, and tired people under dim lamps keep worrying the same phrase like a loose tooth. But under the argument sits the older warning. When power loses restraint, the world rots fast. The wick shortens. The scroll rests, tied and quiet now, but not finished. Outside, the dark holds. Somewhere beyond the walls, rain is still coming. Somewhere in the memory of these old words, Arrogance is still small, violence is still ugly, and appetite is still not holy just because it is strong. And the passage remains long after the first lamps went out. Quieter now, stranger still, and somewhere beyond the shut scroll, beyond the last lamp, beyond the dust and the waiting dark, the warning still lingers.